Welcome to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Join us every Sabbath on Zion Road Radio for a look at the life, deeds, and words of Yeshua Messiah and his followers from the Torah-centric Hebraic perspective they were originally lived and written in.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your souls. You'll find rest for your souls. Oh, you'll find rest for your souls when you walk in his ways.
Today's program is on Matthew chapter 7. What is the difference between the broad way of the world and the narrow way of Messiah Yeshua? And how do we stay on the right path? What makes a wolf in sheep's clothing? And how can we see through their deception? Stay tuned to the end of this program for the answer to these questions and more in the final chapter in Matthew of Messiah's Sermon on the Mount. And now, here's today's first scripture portion. Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 through verse 14. Don't judge so that you won't be judged. For with whatever judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with whatever measure you measure, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but don't consider the beam that is in your own eye? Or how will you tell your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and behold, the beam is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. Don't give that which is holy to the dogs, neither throw your pearls before the pigs, lest perhaps they trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces. Ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. To him who knocks it will be opened. Or who is there among you who, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, who will give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you desire for men to do to you, you shall also do to them. For this is the Torah and the prophets. Enter in by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter in by it. How narrow is the gate, and restricted is the way that leads to life. Few are those who find it. And now, here's Eliyahu ben David on those verses.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your souls. You'll find rest for your souls. Oh, and you'll find rest for your souls when you walk in his ways.
Greetings, friends. We want to welcome you this evening. Tonight, we're looking at Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 through 14. We're calling this Choose Your Path. And this focuses on these very important words of Yeshua Messiah that are part of the Sermon on the Mount. And I think all of us have been so encouraged as we've been going through the Sermon on the Mount and have just been taking in this amazing wisdom that is from our Messiah, showing us the way, showing us his path to walk a better way, a more excellent way. It comes to the end in verse 13 and 14, asking us to choose between these two paths. And one way of seeing these two paths, particularly this narrow path, is that Messiah has been building up to this through the Sermon on the Mount up to this point. And that what we've really been learning from Messiah is life on the narrow path. That's really what it's all about. Not judging other people, for example. That's life on the narrow path. How we behave in the narrow path, seeking, asking, receiving, and so much more that he had to say. It's life on the narrow path with Yeshua Messiah. So we want to just look into this choice a little bit more. We have the broad path or the broad road. A lot of people don't make a conscious choice to take the broad path. It's just sort of what they're dumped into when they're born into this world, and they just keep moving on that path. But even though they don't make a conscious choice, it's still a choice they've made, because there is another path, but they don't look for it. They don't take it. So it is a choice just to not make a choice. The broad path really is the world. And there's a lot in the world that seems very attractive to people. And it's very broad because there's a lot you can choose to do in the world. The narrow path, on the other hand, is the kingdom. And it's narrow because it's restricted. It's set apart away from the ways of the world. And it has its own universe in a way, in the sense that it has its own rules that govern the kingdom, the way things happen there, the way people are to behave in the kingdom. All of that is very different and more narrow and restricted. It's not just wide open like the broad path, the world. So we have the broad way, the world. We have the narrow path, which is the way of the kingdom. People who are on the broad road often think they are broad-minded. That's something that I've seen. For example, people who call themselves progressive. They think of themselves as tolerant and broad-minded. So they're inclusive. They celebrate diversity, not only of different kinds of people, but of different kinds of conduct. They think of people who are on the narrow path as being narrow-minded. And you know what? From a certain point of view, we are narrow-minded. We're narrow-minded in the sense that we have chosen a narrow focus to live by. But it's not an unintelligent narrow-mindedness. It's an informed narrow-mindedness. It's the fact that we've looked at what the world has to offer. We know what it is. It's not like we've just shut ourselves off from understanding it. We know what it is. But we've rejected it in order to choose the narrow path. And yes, the world resents that because they know we're rejecting the way they're on. Now, we're not rejecting them. We'd love to have them on the narrow path with us. But we're not leaving the narrow path to go be with them on the broad way. Just not going to happen. That's not what we're going to do. So they see us as narrow-minded. Sometimes they think of us as self-righteous because we believe that the way we're on is superior, that it's better than the way of the world, the broad way. And we do. We do think it's better. It is better because it comes from our Creator. Yes, it's better. But that's not self-righteous. That's His righteousness that we are seeking after, that we are trying to cultivate within ourselves, that we're opening up our hearts to. His way, His righteousness, not self-righteousness. And the fact that we're doing that because we have chosen the narrow way doesn't mean that we are condemning all the people who are on the broad way. That's part of the lesson we learned tonight, right? About not judging others. It's not up to us to judge them. We know when the judgment's going to be. We know who's going to be the judge, and it isn't you or I. We just hope that some of those folks are going to come and join us on the narrow path. That's what we want, but we're not into judging them. And we know ultimately it is our Father in heaven that is in control. So, yes, there is this charge sometimes that we're narrow-minded because we're on the narrow path. And what is our mind so focused on? Well, we know, for example, His Word, His commandments. We've allowed these to transform our mind, transform our thinking. That's what's restricting the way. On the other hand, how about in the world? In the world, people don't even know what right and wrong is. They fight and argue about it. They don't have a standard. It's an ever-changing attitude. There's no advantage to having things so broad that you don't even have a real direction. On the narrow road, we have a direction. We know where we're going. On the broad road, you have more options. You do. You get to choose, right? You get to do your will. So whatever it is that you want to do, you can just go out there and do it. Whatever it is, and wherever it leads. But be aware of the fact that every choice you make is going to lead somewhere. Out there in the world, people make lots of different choices. And very often those choices lead to destruction. The people go after fame. They go after money. They go after personal pleasure. And all of these things can be very hazardous, and often are. On the narrow path, your options are more restricted. Because on the narrow path, if you're on the narrow path, the reason is because you have chosen His will instead of your own will. And you know what? His will is very specific. And I believe He knows better than I do what my life should be about, what I need to be doing, and where I'm headed. So that's the choice I've made. I don't really think I'm smart enough to choose an effective path on the broad road that's going to lead to the right place. Because Messiah told me where that road leads, and it's not a good place. So I'd rather have his will for my life. That's how it is for people who are on the narrow path. That's not always easy. And yes, it involves some inner struggle sometimes to stay on that path, doing his will. But that's what the narrow path is really about, doing his will, not our own. I have a couple of other verses that kind of feed into this. And you know, there's so many in Scripture. Here's one from 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17. There, the beloved apostle says, "Don't love the world." The world is the broad path. Don't love the world, neither the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the Father's love isn't in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, isn't the Father's, but is the world's. The world is passing away with its lusts, but he who does Elohim's will remains forever. Another way of talking about the two roads, isn't it? Isn't that what it's really talking about? Oh yeah, you can choose the world. You can love the world. You can go after the things in the world. But realize the world is passing away. The world is not of the Father. You know, some people think that if you're a believer, what you should do is concentrate on making the world a better place, right? You hear that sometimes. Make the world a better place. Is that what this verse is telling us to do? The verse is telling us the world is a lost cause. There is no making the world a better place because the world is not of the Father. The world is passing away. This is why on the narrow road we put our energies into building up the kingdom. Because the kingdom is what is going to remain. We want to be a part of the kingdom now so that we will be a part of the kingdom then, right? When the world passes away, we'll still be moving forward. As it says here, he who does Elohim's will remains forever. That's really how that works. Here's another verse. Beloved, now we are children of Elohim, and it is not yet revealed what we will be. The truth is, we don't understand what it means to be glorified. That's what the scriptures say will happen to us when Messiah comes. We're going to receive a glorified body. And the truth is, none of us really know what that is. We don't know how that happens. It's beyond us to know. So that's what he's pointing out. It's not revealed to us yet. We haven't experienced it. We don't have anything to judge that by. We just know it's going to be great. He does say this, though. We know that when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him just as he is. That's our hope. When he comes, we're going to be changed to be what he is. Whatever that is, however that happens, right? We're going to be what he is so that we can see him as he truly is, so that we can fellowship with him as he truly is. going to be fantastic. Everyone who has this hope set on him purifies himself, even as he is pure. You see, this is what the narrow road is about, isn't it? The narrow road is not just about today. It's about where the road leads, where it's going to take us. And it's going to take us to him. That's why we're going there. Because we want to see him as he is. We want to enter into that higher level of fellowship that we will only enjoy when we are what he is. And it's his promise that on the narrow road, that's where we're going to end up. And you see, if you value that, if that really is your goal in your life, then you will purify your life. You'll put away the things of the world, the attitudes of the world, the goals of the world. You'll live a set-apart life following Messiah. And as it says, everyone who has this hope set on him purifies himself even as he is pure. We strive to be like him even now by following his example and allowing his Spirit to change us, to lead us, and to guide us. And where is that going to take us even before we get to everlasting life? Well, I find this verse exciting. This is from Revelation 14, and it talks about the 144,000. From Revelation chapter 7, we see that these are the leaders of the remnant of Israel in the last days that have been drawn out of the tribes of Israel. This is what we aspire to. And it says in their final form, what they get to is this. These are those who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed by Yeshua from among men, the first fruits to Elohim and to the Lamb. In a way, if you were to say, well, where does the narrow road go? The answer would be, it goes wherever Yeshua Messiah goes. And if we're going to travel the narrow road, we need to go wherever he goes. And you don't always know in advance. You don't. But we know if he's there and he's leading us, we want to be with him. And I think that's what's so exciting about the Sermon on the Mount that we're studying right now. Because it's giving us more and more of his mindset and how we can choose daily to walk with him on the narrow path.
You have been listening to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Eliyahu was sharing some of his thoughts on Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 14. The scripture passages he quoted are 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, 1 John chapter 3, verses 2 and 3, and Revelation chapter 14, verse 4. Stay tuned for more thoughts from Eliyahu ben David on Matthew chapter 7 right after this.
crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your soul.
Enjoying this episode of Hebraic Insights in the Gospels? Want to hear more teachings from Eliyahu Ben David? Tune in to our 24/7 internet radio station, Zion Road Messianic Radio. You can catch the latest episodes of Hebraic Insights in the Gospels before they're released as a podcast, learn more about what Zion Ministry teaches from our other programs, and listen to a host of uplifting songs from our independent Messianic music artists. To tune in to our station, go to zion.org. That's TSIYON.org. Or search for Zion Road Messianic Radio. Again, that's Zion, spelled TSIYON, in your favorite internet radio app or station directory. Don't miss the latest episodes. Go to TSIYON.org and check the station schedule to see what's playing. Welcome back. Here's the next part of Messiah's Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 through 29. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravening wolves. By their fruits you will know them. Do you gather grapes from thorns or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree produces good fruit, but the corrupt tree produces evil fruit. A good tree can't produce evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree produce good fruit. Every tree that doesn't grow good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will tell me in that day, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name cast out demons, and in your name do many mighty works? Then I will tell them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work iniquity. Everyone, therefore, who hears these words of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain came down, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it didn't fall, for it was founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. It happened when Yeshua had finished saying these things, that the multitudes were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them with authority, and not like the scribes. Here's more on Matthew chapter 7 from Eliyahu Ben David.
It's going to be kind of exciting because we're drawing to the conclusion now on the Sermon on the Mount. And as Yeshua gets to the end of this sermon, he very aptly now warns us about certain dangers that we face. So this is very important information for us. It's really going to help us as we continue on in our walk with him. We have Matthew 7:15 through 29. In this section, the first thing that Yahweh talks about is the wolves in sheep's clothing. And, that's become a cliche. It started with Yeshua, but it's become a cliche, wolves in sheep's clothing. But what does that really mean when you think about it? Why would a wolf wear sheep's clothing? Right? He's wanting to work his way in there in the midst of the sheep. For what purpose? To tear them up, right? And to devour them. False prophets are very dangerous, not just because they're not telling the truth, but because they have an agenda. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous to other people. And you know, we have reached a crisis level when it comes to false messaging. We've had this meme come up in the media of fake news. And what we find is that it's not just the unknown sites on the internet that are giving us fake news, but it's the mainline news organizations putting out fake news. And what is the purpose of that? It's to make people think something, isn't it? Something that isn't true. There's an agenda connected with that messaging. Well, that's exactly what false prophets are all about. To make you believe something that isn't true in order to fit some agenda. And let's say you do that, you believe it. How can that end up in any kind of good place for you? Because it isn't the truth. And you know, so many people continue to fall for these things. There was a recent story that has come out, and it's really unmentionable. You know, it's not something that I'd even want to explain the specifics of. But when I saw that story about a prominent, well-known figure, I said to my wife, don't even start to believe that. It's not based on any facts. It's not corroborated anywhere. It's clearly propaganda meant to defame somebody. So don't even give that a place in your thought. Don't even think, well, could it be true? If it was true, they'd have this fact, this fact, this fact, this fact, and this fact to tell you it's true. When they're publishing things that they don't even have supported, documented, it's clearly fake news, it's clearly propaganda, and we really shouldn't even let that into our heart to defame someone. You know, and we see this same problem, it happens a lot, even, for instance, in the Messianic realm, in the Christian realm. There's a lot of competition between different ministries and groups. And unfortunately, people attack each other quite a lot. Now, some of this is legitimate because if someone is a false prophet and a danger to the sheep, shouldn't those who have understanding of that point that out? Don't they have an obligation to point it out? So, you know, that's legitimate when that's the case. But a lot of times, it's the wolves that are saying this about the true shepherds, right? Because they want to muddy the water, muddy the atmosphere, so you won't see that they're the wolf. This is why focusing on the fruit is the way to go. Because it's not just about what people say. Although, when you're talking about people who claim to be Bible teachers, what they say needs to be true. And it needs to be based on the scriptures. But that is not enough. There needs to be good fruit from that in order to verify them. There's nothing else that will verify them but good fruit. And essentially, what Yeshua said is the good fruit is doing the will of the Father. Is that the focus? Is that what they're really doing? Are the people who are around them doing that? That's what will tell you whether or not that's a person that you can depend upon. And this is such a critical issue at this particular point in time. We know that we are moving very quickly towards the Great Tribulation. And the most infamous false prophet of all time is going to arise in the world. The person that is often referred to as the Antichrist, the anti-Messiah, actually claiming to be the Messiah. And amazingly, the scriptures tell us that the world as a whole will believe that lie. So, how can we arm ourselves against that? Knowing what the truth is. That's the first thing. The way to know what a false prophet is you got to know what a real prophet is. That's the answer, isn't it? You have to know that. And you have to know what the will of the Father is. And if you do know that and you are walking in that, you won't have any trouble. You won't be deceived by the anti-Messiah. You'll see right through it. But unfortunately, most people are not motivated by such kind of objective observation. Most people are a lot more motivated through their emotions. And the bad people all know that. Right? And we see it all the time, everywhere. We're just being inundated with all of this falsehood from every direction. Manipulation of our emotions, manipulation of our mind. That's the goal of the enemy. So when Messiah says, beware, that has never been more current than it is right now in the world that we're in right now. So we want to take that to heart and beware. And we have so much other good information that we have covered as we've gone through the Sermon on the Mount, that there's a solid foundation there that was laid before we get to the beware part. I really appreciated that in the way that Messiah set that all out. And you can see just his whole way of presenting this, how solid this information is, and just how helpful and useful all of it is to us. It shows the divine wisdom. And it shows why all the people were astonished at the authority with which he spoke. And the more we internalize all of this truth, the more we can be a spokesman for Messiah, the more other people will see that we are different because our lives are based on something real. Our house is built on the rock. It's kind of a serious side here in the Sermon on the Mount, but something so useful and helpful.
You have been listening to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Further teachings and study materials on various related topics and others can be found at our membership site, Zion Tabernacle. Sign up is free. Just go to zion.net. That's TSIYON.net. Or click the membership link on the Zion Road website. New programs on the Gospels will be airing every Sabbath on Zion Road Radio. Join us next Shabbat to learn more in the book of Matthew. Shabbat Shalom!